Good day and welcome to the IPBES Data Management tutorials. Today we will be covering the question why IPBES needs a data management policy and how it concerns the IPBES experts. This session is in the chapter which is titled IPBES Data Management Policy. My name is Rainer Krug and I'm working at the Department of Evolutionary Biology and Environmental Studies at the University of Zurich. And I'm a member of the Task Force on Knowledge and Data within IPBES. Let's jump directly into the question of why a data management policy for IPBES. As we all should know, IPBES does not generate new data. IPBES is using data, existing data, to generate new knowledge. So how does it work in detail? IPBES is tasked with writing assessments of existing knowledge and data, which are then used in policy support. Other important aspects of IPBES are capacity building, knowledge generation of gaps identified in the assessments, and in general, communication and outreach. There are three sides of IPBES, where the first one is that IPBES needs to be policy relevant in all aspects what it is doing. It is legitimacy, co-design of the assessments, and credibility of the work which IPBES is doing. And this is the point where the data management policy is coming in, because IPBES is using existing knowledge and data, which is then integrated to generate new information and data which is used in the assessments. So IPBES itself is not collecting data, is not generating new knowledge, it is merely integrating the existing knowledge and data for the different assessments. And this process needs to be transparent, it needs to be reproducible, because if this process is not reproducible, not communicationable, the credibility of the whole assessments are lacking. So, more detail. What does IPBES want to achieve with its data management policy? First aspect is that it wants to achieve that all outputs are archived for the foreseeable future. This includes all assessments, but not only the assessments itself, but also graphs, tables, and maps in the assessment itself should be archived. To develop these graphs and doing the integration, open source tools should be used for data gathering and analysis. This is important that all the analysis done, all the integration done is reproducible and can be assessed at later stages, and also be repeated in further assessments with the same methodology to see if certain statements, certain states of the environment have changed between the different assessments. Code generated and data generated during the assessments should be available in interoperably open formats because of the same reasons that they can be used without having to buy expensive proprietary software. They should be reproducible. Data and code should be archived for each milestone, not only for the final product, but also for the drafts, first, second order draft, and so on. Each of these outputs should be identifiable via DOIs, and it should be searchable from the IPBES website, as well as from external data search sites, data portals, like for example, Google Data. And to make all of this possible, metadata needs to be stored and provided in standardized schemes so that it can be used for searching and identifying the data. This all sounds very familiar, likely for many of you, because it is essentially the FAIR data management principles. The FAIR data management principles state that data should be findable, that it should be accessible, that it should be interoperable, that it can be used by different approaches and ways and operating systems, and reusable at a later stage. These fair data management principles form the cornerstone of the data management policy of Ipes. In 2019, we were tasked to draft a data management policy, which was in January 2020 approved by the MAP and Bureau meeting. The data management policy is at the recording at version 1.0, and it has DOI, so it can always be accessed through this URL and through this DOI. So, looking a little bit closer into the data management policy, what are the objectives and aims of the data management policy? Well, first of all, as discussed already, it is the aim of making the data and the code used and the whole process of obtaining graphs, tables, and maps for Ipis assessments more fair. To assist experts in making their outputs fair and to provide a framework that the experts are enabled to write data management plans and reports, to provide a framework to long-term storage of the data, for tool selections, and to follow the data management policy in general. And last but not least, the data management policy aims at promoting open source tools within Ipes itself. So how does it concern your experts? So obviously, your experts are expected to follow the data management policy, and with that one, the fair data management principles. To illustrate this, I'll go through the different stages of the assessments and start with the planning stage. During the planning of the assessment and of the work within the assessment, fair data management principles need to be considered for all different stages of the assessment itself. Data management reports need to be written. It needs to be planned which DOIs need to be reserved, for which products DOIs need to be reserved, how many need to be reserved, and in general, the data management policy needs to be adhered to. In the second stage, the selection. It is a selection of data sources and tools. The selection of data sources, it is very important to note that all data which is used in Ipes has to be findable. So it needs to be identifiable and findable at a later stage via a reference or via a DOI or any other identifier which makes it uniquely identifiable and findable. It should be openly accessible, but it doesn't have to be openly accessible. And there are many examples where essential databases are not openly accessible, but which need to be considered in assessments because otherwise crucial information would be missing for the assessments. For the selection of tools, open source tools should be used, as discussed earlier, and scripting tools are preferred. More details about these selections can be found in the chapter Data Management of Active Research Data and in the chapter Tools for Data Management. The next stage is the workflows. These workflows need to be reproducible. Each step within these workflows needs to be documented, and you have to keep track of each step. And they should follow scripts instead of click. So each analysis, each workflow needs to be reproducible at a later stage by anybody who is trying to reproduce your results. This is also discussed in more detail in the chapter Data Management of Active Research Data. The last step is the archival of milestones in general of the data and the generated data in the code. So, what needs to be archived? Each milestone needs to be archived. So you need DOIs for each milestone, and the generated data and the code needs to be included together with the documentation in the actual data deposit packages. The original data, the source data, the external data does not need to be included. in the data package because it is referenced via a DOI. This is also discussed in more detail in the chapter Tools for Data Management. Let me just summarize the most important points of the data management policy, which are relevant to you. The first one is that the data management policy makes Ipes more transparent, more traceable, more reproducible, that it makes essentially Ipes and its products fairer. And the experts are expected to follow this data management policy and especially the fair data management principles. And if you adhere to the fair data management principles, you are essentially in all parts following the data management policy. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this session, why the data management policy for Ipes and how it concerns experts. Feel free to contact us at tsu.data@ipbes.net if you have any questions to these different sessions. Finally, we would like to thank the other contributors to the session, ID Niemir and Joy Kumagai, who helped to prepare the content, as well as the editors of the different chapters and the whole tutorial series. Thank you. It is 1.5 years since we uploaded the last tutorials and the policy was approved. And we're already back with a supplement to these tutorials. Just as a quick recap, the data management policy as it is approved in version 1 is the only data management policy at the Science Policy Interface as far as we are aware. It is centered around the data use, around fair data usage, and it contains free, prior, and informed consent. It also includes commitment to support the experts, to provide means to actually implement the policy into action. But over the next few months, it transpired to us that this policy has a few shortcomings which should be addressed, especially in the context of Ipes. The first is the policy is centered around Western science knowledge systems. ILK knowledge systems were not really integrated except of FPIC. It does not deal with data governance in regards to IPLCs, and it talks only about data, and ILK means indigenous, local, and knowledge. So we have to include the terminology knowledge in the policy as well. So it was decided that we have a full revision of the policy. The aims of that revision in a little bit more detail were, first of all, to weave ILK considerations in the policy and not to add them simply as additional paragraphs. The foundation of the policy should be not only the fair data principles, but also the care principles for indigenous data governance, as they are dealing specifically with how data should be handled in regards to IPLCs. It should contain a balance between fair and care, so that fair is not the overriding factor, and at the moment it stands actually that in some cases care is more considered than fair data usage, because the trust of the indigenous people and local communities is paramount for Ipes. So this resulted in a complete rewrite of the policy itself. No paragraph was left unchanged, it was reordered, rewritten, and additional aspects included. So this resulted now, after more than 18 months of work, in the Data and Knowledge Management Policy version 2.0. It has ILK interwoven in the whole text. All paragraphs, all sections are considering both. It includes knowledge in the title, and it's talking throughout the whole document about data and knowledge, and not only data. It has fair and care principles as its foundation. It includes data governance aspects, and something we can be a little bit proud of is that it contains the terminology collective benefit. So this change has some important meaning for you as the experts. But before we come to that, let's just give a quick recap of the word terminology of care and what care actually means. Care has been developed by the Global Indigenous Data Alliance, and the full term name is Care Principles for Indigenous Data Governance. It consists of the terms collective benefit, authority to control, responsibility, and ethics. And it aims at incorporating these aspects in data handling as a kind of a counterweight to only fair data distribution and data sharing. This has quite a few implications how data should be handled, and to address these we added 2 additional sessions to the tutorials. The first one is session 4.6, which is titled Working with ILK During Assessments. And the second one is session 3.5, which is dealing with the data management reports and has a title Data Management Report Details, Sensitive Data, Anonymization and Ethical Conservation. We hope that these 2 additional sessions and quite a few minor changes and textual supplements to other tutorials will address these issues and guide you along the way of following the policy version 2.0. I would like to thank 3 people particularly who contributed a lot to this policy and also to this tutorial, which are ID Niamir and Joy Kumagai from the Knowledge and Data Task, for the Knowledge and Data Technical Support Unit, and Peter Bates from the Indigenous and Local Knowledge Technical Support Unit. Thank you.